Once the real equilibrium interest rate has been achieved, it seems like it might stay there for a long time. And that's true, it could, but actually it turns out it'll be moving quite often. Why? Because the supply and the demand for loanable funds shifts constantly. And when those curves shift, a new equilibrium is achieved. Check it out. Suppose consumers change their behavior and decide to save more. Which curve shifts which way? I hope you got that right. That would be an increase in the supply of loanable funds. Now, what happens when the supply of loanable funds increases? Well, you can see, here's our previous equilibrium, and the new equilibrium is here. So the equilibrium interest rate is going to fall. Not only that, but the quantity of funds that financial intermediaries shuttle from savers to investors is going to increase. And that's shown right here in this diagram as well. So what else, aside from consumers changing their behavior and saving more, could increase the supply of loanable funds? How about if foreigners decide to make more funds available in our economy? That would work. How about if there's more savings due to a change in incentives? What do you mean? Well, suppose the interest you earned from making a loan was taxed at a lower rate than it had been previously. That would draw in a greater supply of loanable funds. And then lastly, the supply of loanable funds would increase if there was more income earned in the economy. More income means more spending, but more savings as well. I hope you realize that all these factors that can shift the supply of loanable funds work in reverse too. There'll be a decrease in the supply of loanable funds, and our curve will shift in the other direction to the left if consumers change their preferences and decide to save less, if foreigners decide to make less funds available, if there's a tax incentive change so that there's less savings, or if income decreases. So now let's turn our attention to what can affect the demand for loanable funds. What else, aside from the interest rate itself, could affect the demand for loanable funds? When you think of something, that'll shift the curve either left or right. I have a list for us right here, and I have an increase in the demand for loanable funds. What happens? The equilibrium real interest rate rises. As you can see on our diagram, the new equilibrium is at a higher interest rate, and also the quantity of loanable funds increases as well. What could have caused this? How about if businesses expected future sales to be higher? Another way of saying that is business opportunities look brighter. When that occurs, businesses borrow and spend right now, and that increases the demand for loanable funds. What else? How about if new technologies are adopted? New technologies in the production process are expensive, and in order to implement them and adopt them, it's going to require a lot of funds. They borrow to do that, and that increases the demand for loanable funds. This last factor that can increase the demand for loanable funds, an increase in federal government borrowing, that's been a popular question on AP economics exams because it's also known as crowding out. What's going on here is the federal government is borrowing more money. That causes an increase in the demand for loanable funds. And as you can see here in our diagram, that raises the equilibrium interest rate. That rise in the interest rate can choke off business spending on plant and equipment, and that makes fiscal policy less effective. So this is our list of things that can increase the demand for loanable funds, but I hope you realize it works in reverse, and the demand for loanable funds will shift to the left if businesses have bleak expectations about the future. New technologies are not adopted, and government borrowing decreases. So there you have it. Now would be a good time to try some practice problems.